Father?
You said you met Jesus on December 7th.
The 7th of May. If I start talking about it, I'll cry. It was an MIT, of all places. I had just finished that. I defended my doctorate that day. It was I had spent 5 years preparing for this doctorate, and one of the things that you do when you defend a doctorate is you have a 30-minute slide presentation describing all of the research and the data that you've done and you accumulated. And so I prepared this. It had taken months to prepare, and I walked in, and there were a group of 6 scientists in front of me, and the chair, Bob Horowitz, would go on to win the Nobel Prize 4 years later. And it was very intimidating. And I went in, and I had the slideshow ready, and Bob goes, "Nick, we've decided we don't want to listen to your slideshow. In 5 minutes or less, tell us why we should give you your PhD today." Now, see, it was choke, all right? I choked. But you see, in that moment of choke, I remembered that my friends at the Catholic Fellowship promised that wherever they were at MIT, they'd stop to pray. You see? And I looked outside the seminar room on the second floor of Building 68, and there were a few of them there, and they were like, "Yeah!" And they were waving. And I discovered the church. I understood for the first time what the church was about. You know, I've been going to church all my life, but I understood. And so, of course, 5 minutes went on for 2 hours, and I defended my degree, and we argued and yelled, and so after 2 hours, they kick you out, and you have to pace for 15 minutes, and they have to decide if you're good enough. And so I walked out, and I came back, and, Bob, this is how it works, Bob he says, "Congratulations, Dr. Austriaco. That's it, you're done. You have your degree." And my advisor had a champagne party ready, but I decided I had to go to church. So I went to Mass. It was Mass, and Father was there. And I walked in late because the thing went late. And my friends were there. It was like if you've been to MIT, there's this really surreal chapel, and it looks like it's about to take off. But there were like maybe eight, 9 of us. And then during the prayers of intercession, I got to thank God for my PhD. And my friends were like, "Oh, yeah." And so Father asked us to go around the altar of sacrifice. And when he got to the words of consecration, so, he raised the Lord. And I looked at him, and I said, "Thank you." I just, "Thank you." And, a special grace was given. And God, it's so, even 15 years later. I knew he was alive. And my parents, "What do you mean?" I just knew he was alive, that he was there. And I could see my life, and I could see all the really difficult times of my life, and I could see how he was there. And so 10 years before that, I had come to the United States, and it was my first winter, and it was horribly cold, and I didn't know how cold it could get. And I was in Philadelphia, and I was walking down Walnut Street, and I came to the corner of Walnut and Chestnut and 40th, and St. Agatha and St. James is there. And there was a sign. And I didn't remember this until then. You know how, 10 years later, the sign that said, "Come to me, all who are weary and I will give you rest. And I was miserable that winter. And I remember, even with little faith, really, I mean, not really knowing, I remember standing there, shivering, miserable, looking at that sign in front of this church and saying, okay, I take you up on that. And I forgot. You see, so I forgot I'd done that. And then 10 years later at that Mass, I could see that once I did that, like, things had happened. I could see how my third year in graduate school, as an undergrad, when I thought I failed electrical engineering 210 bioinstrumentation, the final was horrible. I was in my apartment, and I was feeling really horrible because I thought I'd flunked the exam. And I remember looking out the window and thinking, oh, I wish I had someone here I could talk to. And Michael Green, my roommate from freshman year, was at the door. And I could see, like, I didn't know that this was all connected. You see, so you didn't know that this is all there. Like, and he did it because he loved me. And wow, that just blew my mind that God could love me that much. And so I was going to get married and stuff, but things changed. Things changed. They had to change because my parents thought I was nuts because I had a PhD and I had a job and everything. And when I told them that I want to become a Dominican, they thought I was brainwashed. But then my father flew out. My father flew to London, actually, because he and my mother were in shock. So my father flew out to London. I picked him up at Heathrow, and we went to Chinatown. And we sat there, and my father was like, why do you want to become a priest? And I talked, and I talked, and I talked for 2 hours. And I talked about this, and I talked about Christ, and he just listened and listened and listened. And at the end, he said, you talk about God like I talked about your mother. But he went home, but my mother didn't believe him, so she got a plane. So she got on a plane, flew to London. I mean, it was like a total. They fought. I mean, they're deeply Catholic, but I'm the oldest son, and they had things already kind of in plan. So it took 7 years, actually. It was very hard for them every single year until I was ordained. The grace of ordination converted them, and until then, it was a fight, and it was always a deep sacrifice on my part, because every time first year in the novitiate, we were allowed to call home once a month, and my mother would cry all the time on the phone. And it was sad because I couldn't share the joy. Once I received the habit, and once I had begun to discover that to live a consecrated life would be life-giving. I didn't know that. You don't really know that at the beginning. And you think you'll be lonely and miserable. And then you discover that Christ and his mother are amazing. And that your heart, I was in London when I was discerning. And actually, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to the Dominican student brothers at our house of studies. And they asked me, they asked me, what is the one thing you've learned about religious life? I've been a priest now. I will be for 10 years in 2 days. And I said, well, the story that best encapsulates my experience of religious life and the holy priesthood was a conversation I had with a Carmelite nun in the Carmel in London. And I was flying back to the United States to enter the novitiate. And I went to see this very aged senior nun who had been in the Carmel for like gazillion years. And she said, brother, what are you most scared about as you enter religious life? And I remember telling her, I said, sister, I've discovered there's a hole in my heart. And I'm hoping that my brothers will help me to fill it. Because I'm scared I'll be lonely. And she looked at me, this twinkle in her eyes through the grill, and she said, oh, brother, that hole will get larger I was like, what? I was like, what? And she goes, oh, yes, brother. She says, and she looked at me, and she, with a smile, she said, God is going to make that hole so big that he will be able to fit inside. And that has encapsulated my life as a Dominican friar. It is that stretching of a very small hole that wants to be filled up with creatures and to be opened up and to be expanded so that the Creator can fit. And of course, I'm the one who's fighting to keep it small. And he is trying very hard to keep it big and to expand it to make it even bigger than I can imagine. And anyway, thank you very much.